at the Super Bowl, as I like to call it, the Super Bowl. Can we get the U.S. population out of the Super Bowl? Well, and a little anecdote. I talked once to a UAW guy. He was the United Auto Workers, UAW organizer, and he would go into the southern states where you had, you know, the local families, the first families of Virginia, wherever it was, and the local bull counter operation, and the state police, right, with dogs and truncheons. And he would go in there and he'd try to organize. And I found this a fascinating job for the guy to have. And I asked him, what do you think? Are we ever going to have a mass upsurge, a mass strike, a general strike? And he said, no, not in this country, because all of these poor guys are 2 paychecks away from losing their home.
That's right.
Well, we now have 10 million people who have got nothing left to lose. And they may well come out in the street. And remember, I have to offer a Luxemburgian correction here, right, among the different schools of Marxism that we seem to have. The one that always interested me the most was the Rosa Luxemburg one, the mass strike. And of course you have to propagandize the idea of a mass strike or a general strike. It's also wonderful if you have a big organization that can bring out a lot of people on its own. But then there's always the question of the detonating event, as we saw in Spain, right? And I think it's wonderful that we've talked about Spain, because I think that proves that that can happen in our time. Are the American people morally degenerate? Are they decadent past the point of no return? I hope not. I bet not. I say not. I think that's all we can do, is place our bets that something will happen.
That's why they're in the right place now.
Well, they're not in the right place now, but they might be. In other words, the right place now would be out in the streets.
Right. Well, so as I said before,
did I cover all your points?
You hit all the questions I was going to ask you. You hit them all. All right. So I want to just give just a little bit here, because that was small, Webster. Okay, to let the panel, as now we're collectively together, let's have a brief conversation, because I want to go on to the next stage of this operation, which these folks talk to each other. But all right, you heard all that. Anybody want to speak forth to what we've come to? Go ahead, Ralph.
Plato in the Republic advocated that the elite was threatened by the mass. It was a profoundly anti-democratic document, and it was a desperate call amongst the privileged to withstand the demands and needs of the many. I don't want to even get into Machiavelli and his machinations amongst the rulers of the time. What does this have to do with the price of eggs, brothers and sisters? Apocalyptic predictions with the Ides of March. The world is blowing up. Putin's going to drop nuclear bombs on New York. Frankly, to my way of thinking, this is the turd in the punch bowl. It contaminates analysis about the realities with which we are confronted with the kinds of things with which we cannot begin to be associated. Concretely and specifically, this mishmash of various candidates and political figures, all of whom are part of political apparatus that has sustained the predations of capital decade after decade after decade, associated with it, promoting it. The Nixon impeachment, that was a preemptive strike because of the mass disaffection, the loss of the U.S. Army as a consequence of the protracted war in Indochina. Ford is the figure, brothers and sisters, who went down with Earl Warren to interview Jack Ruby after a year and a half of delay. And when Ruby said to them, look, there was a conspiracy involving the military and the generals to take out the head of state. And they said, we have to break for lunch, Mr. Ruby. And Ford and Warren fathered upon Jack Ruby the fiction that he had shot Oswald in order to spare Jacqueline Kennedy the ordeal of a trial. These figures, this was designed. The Nixon impeachment was a holding action to prevent mass mobilization. And precisely in the hands of the very political figures who are concerned above all to preserve the system of predation. It is corporate capitalism. It is an imperialism addicted to war. You cannot transform this by appealing or relying upon the political elements that are totally integrated within its maintenance and its continuation. Program is about identifying our constituents and challenging who owns and controls our society and who is committed and obligated to pursue perpetual war. This is the task, and this is obfuscation of this content of what a political challenge has to be about is no service, brothers and sisters. In my judgment, it is disinformation, and it prevents, and it delays, and it obscures, and it is a problem for a serious program of struggle and change in this society.
Okay. I don't see that. I hear, Ralph, what you're saying there. I don't see that as really contradictory. I think the general strike, the mobilization of the people around particular present issues, I think correlates with what you're saying. I would say, with the position, where you're coming from is right on, no question about it. How do we get there, you know, and from right this second where we are now? Or that's what the challenge is. But then you want to...
Well, there's an historical error.
No, we're not going to go into that. You guys can talk to each other in a minute.
There's an historical error there, the Nixon impeachment. The Nixon impeachment was in 1974. The U.S. peace movement had already started to collapse after 1972.
Right.
And there wasn't a danger of an insurrection in 1974. It was already going downhill. The impeachment of Richard Nixon was a punishment for the disaster that had been inflicted on the country, but there was no danger of an uprising in the United States in 1974. I'm sorry. I was part of that movement, and it was a depressing time. It was a depressing time because it was going downhill.
Well, I think he means that the only reason the United States left Vietnam was because there was defeated. They lost the war, you know. So
we weren't
in
danger of a revolution in the United States in 1974.
All right. So, did you have something you wanted to say, Maya? Anything you wanted to add to this whole deal here? Because I want to hear from everybody. I don't want to hear back from you even. Because I want to move on.
Yes.
What?
Individual candidates, individual actions. These may be nice people. It is still, again, a system of organization. There have been many points when people have been co-opted and brought back into the Democratic Party within the incredible civil rights struggle with the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party and the negotiations to destroy the emergence of a black party in this country, with the destruction of what was becoming a labor party, even growing out of the Minneapolis general strike, with the farm labor parties. This has happened over and over again. The farm labor party became the Democratic Party of Minnesota, putting forward Hubert Humphrey. This has happened time and time again, and as I said, with the pro-choice movement, we're now brought the incredible resurgence of 1 million people in the streets back into the Democratic Party, and again with what was happening with the trade unions and the construction of the Labor Party. And at the time, the New York Times had a poll at the time of the election of Bill Clinton, first election, that over 51% of the population did not support the Democratic Party in terms of an election. It was an incredible moment for building a political party. That was then shunted again because of the concept of lesser evil, the concept of reality. I mean, this is one of the most ridiculous. Reality is the daily struggle, the daily oppression that we face time and again. Walk into the streets of Washington, D.C., and you can tell me that the reality is not oppression, and that the reality isn't that there's only one thing that should be on our mind, is how to build our own effective organization. The question is not in 2008 allowing again an open road for which Democrat, which disgusting oppressor is going to be elected. That is the question that has to be on our mind. That is the question. That means building effective program, building effective organization, linking again. Most of the people in the labor movement understand the importance of organization. They understand the destruction of their organization. They want their own representation. When I was organizing for the Labor Party, and you went local by local, we had support. The support was not at the higher ups. right?
That's true.
You go, and you know, there was once, I'd like to say, about organization in the United States. Bill Moyers, to his benefit, years and years ago, did a very important show on PBS. And he showed in this program that the people of the United States are the most highly organized in the world. If you go and you look at all the soccer teams and the soccer moms and all the church organizations,